Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the Darkest Dungeon mod spotlight for this week. Now we will take a look at the Lord's Blade class created by Caedwyn as well. The Lord's Blade is based on the Lord's Blade Caedwyn from Dark Souls. Caedwyn was one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and a member of the Lord's Blades. Her style and tactics are much like a thief or an assassin, favoring her twin daggers, Gold Tracer and Dark Silver Tracer, to inflict bleed and poison on her enemies. And just like Caedwyn from the lore, the Lord's Blade class does much the same. She is a fast but fragile hero that relies on weakening the enemy with bleed, blight, and marking, before going in for powerful finishers. She is quite capable of working on her own, but would certainly appreciate some help setting up enemies. Since the Lord's Blade and the Abyss Walker are close companions, they have additional synergies should you choose to bring both classes on a mission together. Now, let's go through the Lord's Blade's stat line. She has above average dodge. She has above average crit and disease resistance. And there's a couple areas where she particularly excels. Her speed is absolutely top notch. Her blight resistance is really good. And her trap disarm is higher than you're ever going to need it. She has average bleed resistance, average move resistance, and average debuff resistance. Her weaknesses are a lower than average health, a lower than average damage, lower stun resistance, and that's it. She has the ability to move forward or back 2 spaces, so pretty mobile, on top of some of her abilities moving around as well. So she can be a good candidate for shuffle parties. Now, even though I said her damage is lower than average, this is made up with most of her abilities having bonus damage versus certain conditions. So in practice, she does hit pretty good damage most of the time, on top of her above average crit. So you can still put out some pretty good numbers. The Lord Blade's first couple abilities are her finishers, the first of which being Mutilate, which she can use from positions 1, 2, or 3 to attack positions 1, 2, or 3 on the enemy team. It has a damage penalty of 20%. And I'd be like, hey, what gives? This is supposed to be a finisher. Why does it have 20% damage penalty? Well, that's because if your target is blighted or bleeding, they gain, or Mutilate gains 5 to 15 accuracy and 60 to 100 increased damage. If they are both blighted and bleeding, then you gain a total of 10 to 30 accuracy and 120 to 200% increased damage. So, yeah, if you can set this up, you can hit really hard. Additionally, Mutilate moves you forward 1, so you can help get yourself towards the front if you want. Or if the enemy is set up for Mutilate, you can't just keep doing it over and over. I mean, you can, but then you're going to be in the front line, and the Lord's Blade is pretty fragile, so you may want to consider doing something else instead of hanging around in the front row.
Continue the onslaught. Destroy.
The Lord's Blade second ability and another finisher is Backstab. This is used from positions 2, 3, and 4 to also hit positions 1, 2, and 3 of the enemy team. It moves you forward 2 spaces, so it can help you bring you back to the mid ranks if you're in position 4, or bring you all the way to the front if you're in positions 2 or 3. It has a bonus 10% damage modifier and a very high crit modifier, starting at 10% rank 1 and scaling up from there. Plus, it has a bonus of 30 to 70% damage versus marked targets, and 10 to 30% armor piercing if the enemy is blighted. So, depending on whether you want to be marking targets or blighting and bleeding them, is kind of deciding whether you want to use Mutilate or Backstab. Plus, Backstab has the nice bonus that you might get that armor piercing if you decide to blight targets as well. And the high crit modifier can give you some pretty spectacular results sometimes. But Mutilate does have a higher total damage bonus if you can have the target both blighted and bleeding.
Masterfully executed.
The Lord's Blade's next ability is Golden Strike. This is not a finisher, but it is in fact an ability to help set up your finishers. You can use it from positions 2, 3, and 4 versus positions 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the enemy team, making it very versatile. However, it does almost no damage, with a 90% damage penalty. It does have a high crit modifier though, so you can get a crit sometimes to help reduce stress and to extend the duration of your bleed. Speaking of the bleed, you have a 100 to 140% chance to apply a 1 to 2 point bleed for 5 to 7 rounds. It's not a very strong bleed, but its primary purpose is just to set up a bleed on the target for a good number of turns so you can use Mutilate over and over. Or, if you prefer, you can rely on the mark, because Golden Strike also marks the target for 4 rounds, which you can use for Backstab. And finally, the ability has a 100 to 140% chance to debuff the target for 10 to 30% blight resistance for 5 rounds. And even though it doesn't display it here, it also debuffs the enemy dodge by 3 to 15% at a 100 to 140% rate. The Lord's Blade's next ability is Fast Roll. She can use this from positions 1 and 2, and it moves you back 2 spaces. It stealths you for 2 rounds, though the rounds tick over as soon as your turn ends, so it's really just 1 round. And it buffs your dodge by 10 to 20% for 3 rounds. This is a good way to get yourself out of trouble if you're in the front row and maybe you've taken a hit or two and you're in a little bit of a sticky situation. You can fast roll, get yourself into a much safer position, buff your dodge, and ensure that enemies can't target you directly. You'd only be targeted by AoE abilities, which probably have a lower accuracy anyway, so you stand a fair chance at being able to dodge them. The Lord's Blade's 5th ability is Throne Tracer. She can use this from positions 2, 3, and 4 to hit positions 2, 3, and 4 of the enemy team. It has a damage penalty of 20%, but it has very high crit, just like Backstab, starting at 10%. It gains 30 to 70% damage versus marked targets, and 10 to 30% armor piercing versus blighted enemies. It's not quite as strong as a finisher as like Backstab or Mutilate, but it can be pretty effective, and it is the only of her heavily damaging attacks, at least, that can hit the back row. So in that regard, it still sees a fair bit of use. Ability number 6 is Silver Strike. She can use it from positions 2, 3, and 4 versus any position on the enemy team. It has a 90% damage modifier, just like Golden Strike, but it has that same high crit modifier. Its main purpose is to apply a 1 to 3 point bleed for 5 to 7 rounds, again to help set up Mutilate or whatever ability you want, Backstab, to get the armor piercing. And it debuffs the enemy for with a 100 to 140% chance of lowering their speed by 3 to 5 points for 4 rounds, and 100 to 140% chance to debuff their bleed resistance by 10 to 30% for 5 rounds as well. So you can see how all her abilities are kind of interlocking. Lower their bleed resistance, and then bleed them, which lowers their blight resistance, and you mark them, and then you can put your finishers in there. They all work together. It's all a matter of how you want to piece them together. And her final ability, and probably her most useful and interesting one, is Estus Brew. She can only use it once per battle from any position. It gives her 2 additional actions. So you consume an action to use it, and then it gives you 2 more. One of which you use immediately, and then another you might get immediately, you might not. It depends on what your speed is and what the speed of everyone else in the battle is. Additionally, it heals the Lord's Blade for 2 to 10 points. It also debuffs your speed by 3 points and your dodge by 15 points for 3 rounds. So on the one hand, you can get 2 actions now instead of 1, but at the cost of lowering your speed for a bit, and you're going to be less evasive. Still, it is a pretty useful ability, and I found myself using it at the start of most fights. I guess one downside of it is that, since you can still only equip 4 abilities at a time, equipping Estus Brew really limits your skill choices in battle. You kind of pick, like, Estus Brew, something to set up a finisher, your finisher, and then you might have one skill kind of flexible that you might go with Fast Roll or Throne Tracer, or perhaps the other strike that you didn't choose.
Well struck.
Alright, let's take a quick look at our camping skills. The first one being Envenom. For 3 time points, the entire party gets 30% Blight and Bleed skill chance until the next time you camp. This can be pretty cool if you want to build a party around heavily blighting and bleeding enemies. This can significantly increase your ability to do so, especially against enemies that already have naturally high resistance. This could be that extra bit you need to punch through. Her next camping skill is Companionship. For 3 time points, the Lord's Blade buffs her own accuracy by 10 for 4 battles. And you select a companion, and if that companion is an Abyss Walker class, the Abyss Walker gets 33% less stress as long as they are in Noble or Pure mode until the next time they camp. And they heal for 33% stress, or 33% more stress until the next time they camp as well. So this is the synergy with the Abyss Walker class to just help them manage their stress levels that much more. Plus, you still get 10 accuracy out of the deal. That's not too bad. If you didn't want to bring an accuracy trinket, let's say, you could use Companionship to get your accuracy where it needs to be. Her next skill is Lurker. For 3 time points, you lower the chance that your party gets surprised by 20% for 4 battles. It prevents nighttime ambush. The Lord's Blade gets a buff that allows her to ignore stealth until the next time you camp. So just naturally, with all of her abilities, she will be able to attack enemies that are stealth directly. Could be useful in some situations. And she gains 25% increased damage as long as you're stealth until the next time you camp. So the only way you can stealth, of course, is with fast roll. If that's something you find yourself using a lot, maybe you can combine it with Lurker to get a nice damage bonus out of it as well. Personally, I didn't find I needed to use it, but then again, I'm going through pretty easy dungeons. Maybe it'll be more important in veteran and champion dungeons. And her last camping skill is Lloyd's Sagely Wisdom. For 2 time points, the party gets a bunch of random buffs. They get a 35% chance of 10% crit, a 35% chance of 10 accuracy, 35% chance of 10% damage, and a 35% chance of 3 speed, all of the buffs lasting for 4 battles. There's that one entry that says 35% chance and doesn't list anything, but that's just another quirk of how the buffs display. It's pay it no mind, it doesn't matter. For 2 time points, this isn't too bad. You can get a medley of useful buffs to your entire party. If you get even one of these to stick to your party, it's probably worth the time points. If you get a couple, it's pretty good. But you don't know. It's totally random, so who knows? But it is probably worth the time points. So some other information about the Lord's Blade. The Lord's Blade benefits from the House of the Yellow Hand district. When you get a crit on enemies, you get a 20% increased light, bleeding, and debuff chance. Now, man, it feels like I'm missing something because the Abyss Walker had so much information, and the Lord's Blade's like, oh yeah, that's basically it. Talking about her skills, I tended to use... obviously, you want to generally go with either Mutilate or Backstab. If you go Mutilate, you probably want Silver Strike, Estus, and you could either go Golden Strike. If you're fighting a strong enemy, you can pop your Estus on the first round, Silver Strike, Golden Strike, and then on the next turn you can Mutilate. Alternatively, you can just go for one of the lighter bleed and just pick up fast roll as well, just so when you get to the front of the party, you can just fast roll to get yourself to safety again. If you're using Backstab, I found myself using Golden Strike and Throne Tracer. So I would Estus, Golden Strike to mark them, and then either Throne's Tracer if I didn't want to move, or if I wanted to hit someone in the back row, and Backstab to do more heavy damage against the front liners, since Backstab does have that positive damage modifier, and potentially armor piercing if you can get Blight on them as well. I feel that Lord's Blade is going to be a bit stronger against a boss. I certainly would like to try her against the boss, because then I can get those long-lasting Blight and Bleed effects on the boss, and then just mutilate turn after turn after turn, and probably get some good damage. I mean, even with just one of the damage over time on them, Mutilate still hits pretty hard. Or Backstab feels a lot simpler to use because you only need to mark them. Even that is pretty effective. In conclusion, the Lord's Blade is a quick and deadly assassin. She fits the fantasy of an assassin quite well with the high speed, damage over time, and vicious finishers. I feel that she is in a pretty good spot balance-wise. She has her drawbacks against regular enemies because her damage requires a setup. You need to use Estus to get those extra actions. But if you do, then you're lowering her dodge, exposing her to danger. And with such low health, it's very easy to be put on death's door with an unlucky crit. And if there are multiple enemy threats, it's hard for her to switch targets without losing damage. Still, it felt like she had a purpose and did it well. Just like with the Abyss Walker mod, I really enjoyed the sound effects, mostly coming directly from Dark Souls. The Backstab sound and the Estus sound are the most memorable and add to the style of the mod. In a flash, she appears behind you and says, "No hard feelings, kid."
Masterfully executed.